The moment Daniel Harper saw Vivian Hart standing in that doorway, water still dripping from her hair, nothing but a white towel between them and complete disaster, he knew his carefully controlled life was about to shatter. She was his best friend's mother, a billionaire, untouchable, and she was looking at him like he was the only real thing she'd seen in years. If you want to see how a single afternoon delivery turned into the most dangerous emotional connection of two lives, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Daniel Harper's Thursday started the way every Thursday started, with cold coffee, a design deadline, and the particular chaos only a 7-year-old could generate before 8 a.m. "Dad, I can't find my blue shirt." "It's in the dryer, Mia." Daniel didn't look up from his laptop screen. The website mock-up for a local bakery stared back at him, stubbornly refusing to look as good as it had at midnight. Daylight had a way of exposing every lazy gradient and uninspired font choice. "The dryer's making that noise again." "What noise?" "The angry noise." Daniel closed his eyes. The dryer had been making the angry noise for 3 weeks. He'd been ignoring it with the focused determination of a man whose bank account couldn't handle another repair bill until the bakery client paid their invoice. "Just grab the green one," he called out. "I hate the green one." "Then grab the red one." "Emma's wearing red today. We planned it. We're doing twin day." Daniel finally looked up from the screen. Mia stood in the kitchen doorway, one sock on, hair attempting escape from the ponytail he'd managed that morning, holding a waffle like it had personally betrayed her. "Mia, you're not twins." "It's pretend twins, Dad." "Right. Sorry, forgot the rules of pretend twins." He stood up, stretched, felt his lower back protest the 3 hours he'd already spent hunched over the keyboard. "Blue shirt. Got it." The dryer was indeed making the angry noise, a grinding metal sound that suggested imminent death. Daniel extracted the blue shirt, still slightly damp, and brought it to Mia's room where she had somehow located and applied lip gloss in the 90 seconds he'd been gone. "You're 7. Emma's mom lets her." "Emma's mom makes different choices." "Bad choices?" "I didn't say that." "You made the face." Daniel absolutely had made the face. He helped Mia into the shirt, managed to wipe off most of the lip gloss with a tissue, and had her out the door with 4 minutes to spare before the school bus arrived. The same school bus that had been exactly on time every single day for 2 years, which Daniel appreciated in a way that probably said something depressing about his life. Back inside, he returned to the bakery website, made the gradient less lazy, changed the font to something with more personality, and sent it off with a note that tried to sound confident rather than desperate. Freelance web design was feast or famine, and he'd been living in famine territory for 6 weeks. The bakery gig would cover groceries and maybe the dryer. The electric bill would have to wait. His phone buzzed. Ryan Miller. His best friend since college, back when Daniel had been a different person entirely. Younger, stupider, considerably less burdened by responsibility and appliance repair costs. "Hey man, huge favor. Left my backpack at my place. Important client docs inside. Any chance you could grab it and drop it at my mom's house? I'm stuck in Tampa for another meeting." Daniel stared at the message. Ryan's mom's house. Vivian Hart's house. He'd never actually been there. In the 15 years he'd known Ryan, their friendship had existed in bars, basketball courts, Ryan's apartment, Daniel's apartment, and exactly one disastrous camping trip that had ended with Ryan's sleeping bag catching fire. Vivian Hart herself was more concept than person in Daniel's mind. Ryan didn't talk about her much, and when he did, it was with the complicated mixture of pride and resentment reserved for children of the spectacularly successful. She'd built her tech company from nothing, sold it for an amount of money that had too many zeros to feel real, and now ran a venture capital firm that had her name in business magazines Daniel couldn't afford to subscribe to. "Where's the backpack?" Daniel typed back. "Kitchen counter. Door code is 4729. Mom probably won't be home till late. Just grab and go. You're a lifesaver." Daniel looked at the clock. 10:47 a.m. He had nothing pressing until Mia's bus dropped her off at 3:15. He could drive to Ryan's apartment, grab the backpack, drop it at the Hart house, and be home with time to spare. On it, he sent back. Ryan's apartment was the kind of place that made Daniel simultaneously envious and grateful. Envious because it was clean, modern, decorated like an adult actually lived there rather than a man in survival mode with a second grader. Grateful because he'd never want to be the kind of person who owned that many throw pillows. The backpack was exactly where Ryan said it would be, an expensive leather thing that probably cost more than Daniel's laptop. He grabbed it, locked up, and headed to the address Ryan had sent. The Hart House wasn't a house. It was a statement. Modern architecture, all glass and clean lines, sitting on what had to be 3 acres of impeccably maintained property in one of Orlando's most expensive neighborhoods. The kind of place that made Daniel acutely aware of the check engine light that had been on in his Honda for 2 months. He pulled into the circular driveway, killed the engine, grabbed the backpack. The door code worked. The interior was exactly what he expected. Minimalist, expensive, the kind of place where every object had been chosen by someone who charged by the hour. Hello? No answer. Daniel moved through the entryway, looking for somewhere logical to leave a backpack. The kitchen seemed obvious. He headed that direction, turned a corner, and stopped walking. Vivian Hart stood in the hallway 15 feet away, wrapped in a white towel, wet hair plastered to her shoulders, looking at him with an expression that cycled through surprise, recognition, and something else he couldn't quite name. "You're Daniel," she said. It wasn't a question. Her voice was lower than he expected, steadier. She didn't shriek, didn't clutch the towel dramatically, didn't do any of the things a person might reasonably do when encountering an unexpected man in their hallway. Ryan sent me backpack." Daniel held it up like evidence, his brain refusing to form complete sentences. "He said you wouldn't be home. I usually wouldn't be." She pushed wet hair back from her face, completely unbothered by the situation in a way that made him feel even more off balance. "Meeting got canceled. Decided to actually use the shower I paid for. I should go." "You can leave it on the kitchen counter." "Right. Kitchen, counter." Daniel moved past her, maintaining maximum distance, trying not to look directly at her while also trying not to make it obvious he was trying not to look at her. The backpack made it onto the counter. Mission accomplished. He turned to leave. She was still standing there, blocking the path back to the front door. "You want coffee?" she asked. What?" "Coffee. It's a beverage. Makes people feel more alert. I have some already made." Daniel's brain finally caught up to the situation. "You're asking me if I want coffee while you're wearing a towel. I can get dressed if it makes you more comfortable, though I'm not sure why my state of dress should impact your caffeine intake." She moved to the kitchen, opened a cabinet, pulled down 2 mugs with the casual confidence of someone completely untroubled by social conventions. "Ryan talks about you constantly. Daniel this, Daniel that. I was starting to think you were imaginary." "He talks about me? You're his best friend. Of course he talks about you." She poured coffee into both mugs, slid one across the counter toward him. "Though he's somehow never mentioned you being this uncomfortable around women." "I'm not uncomfortable around women. I'm uncomfortable around my best friend's mother, who is currently not wearing clothes." "I'm wearing a towel." "That's not clothes. It's covering everything essential." "That's really not the point." Vivian smiled then, the first genuine expression he'd seen from her. It transformed her entire face, made her look younger, less like a billionaire and more like an actual person. "Relax, Daniel. I'm going to get dressed. Drink your coffee. Don't steal anything." She disappeared down a hallway. Daniel stood in the kitchen, holding the coffee mug, trying to process what had just happened. This was Vivian Hart, the woman Ryan described in carefully neutral terms that suggested years of complicated family dynamics. The CEO who'd been featured in Forbes, the venture capitalist whose investment decisions moved markets. She was also apparently someone who made small talk in a towel. He sipped the coffee. It was perfect. Of course it was perfect. Probably some expensive imported beans he couldn't pronounce. Vivian returned wearing black jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair still damp but no longer dripping. She looked different than the photographs Daniel had accidentally seen online. Softer, more approachable, lacking the armor of business suits and carefully managed public appearances. "Better?" she asked. "Substantially." She picked up her own coffee mug, leaned against the counter across from him. "So, Ryan's told me you're a web designer. How's that going?" "It's going." Daniel took another sip, buying time. "Freelance is inconsistent. Some months are good. Some months I'm deciding between fixing the dryer and paying the electric bill." "You have a daughter." Mia, she's 7. Ryan mentioned her mother isn't in the picture. She left when Mia was 2, decided motherhood wasn't for her. Daniel was used to this conversation, had learned to deliver the information flatly, without the emotional weight that used to come with it. Haven't heard from her in 5 years. That's hard. We manage. Vivian studied him over her coffee mug. You know what I like about you already? What? You didn't call her a bad person. You didn't trash talk her. Most men would have. She made a choice. Wasn't the choice I wanted, but it was hers to make. Mia doesn't need me poisoning that well. He set down the mug. I should really get going. You don't want to hear what Ryan talks about? I'm not sure I do, actually. He says you're the most genuine person he knows, that you don't pretend to be anything you're not, that you show up. Vivian's expression softened. He told me about when Mia had pneumonia last year, how you sat with her in the hospital for 3 days straight, and he brought you food because you refused to leave her side. Daniel felt his throat tighten. Any parent would do that. You'd be surprised what people don't do, even when they should. She refilled his coffee without asking. Ryan worries about you. He shouldn't. He thinks you're lonely. The word landed harder than it should have. Daniel looked away, focusing on the expensive appliances, the marble countertops, anything but Vivian's too knowing gaze. I'm busy, he said finally. There's a difference. Is there? I have Mia, I have work, I have Ryan, I have a life. But are you lonely? Daniel met her eyes. They were dark brown, almost black, and completely devoid of judgment. She wasn't asking to be cruel. She was asking because she genuinely wanted to know. Sometimes, he admitted, late at night after Mia's asleep, when the work's done and the apartment's quiet. Yeah, sometimes. Vivian nodded slowly. I live in a 8,000 square foot house, have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. Can go anywhere, do anything, buy whatever I want. She paused. And I eat dinner alone 6 nights a week, wondering what the point of any of it is. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Daniel didn't know what to say. This wasn't how conversations with billionaire CEOs were supposed to go. Ryan doesn't know that, Vivian continued. He thinks I'm too busy building empires to notice the silence. And maybe I let him think that because it's easier than admitting I've built this incredible life that somehow feels completely empty. Why are you telling me this? Because you're safe. Safe? You're not trying to get something from me. You're not networking. You're not angling for investment in some startup. You're just Ryan's friend who dropped off a backpack and accidentally saw me in a towel. She smiled slightly. And because you admitted you're lonely, people who can admit that are rare. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Mia's school. Parent-teacher conference reminder for next week. He needed to get home, start working on the next project proposal, do laundry, figure out dinner. I really do need to go, he said. Okay. But he didn't move. Neither did she. This was weird, Daniel said. Extremely weird, Vivian agreed. Your son is my best friend. I'm aware. And you're... He gestured vaguely at her, the house, everything she represented. Rich? Powerful? Intimidating? Vivian's smile turned wry. All true. Also lonely. Also human. Also wondering why the hell I just told a stranger about eating dinner alone. I'm not a stranger. I'm Ryan's friend. Right, which makes this even weirder. Daniel picked up his keys from the counter. I'm going to leave now before this gets any stranger. Probably smart. He made it to the front door before her voice stopped him. Daniel? He turned. She stood in the kitchen doorway, backlit by the afternoon sun streaming through the massive windows, looking simultaneously powerful and vulnerable. Thanks for the delivery, she said, and the conversation. Thanks for the coffee. Come back sometime, when you need a break from being lonely. It was a terrible idea. Daniel knew it immediately, felt it in his gut the same way he'd felt it when Ryan suggested the camping trip that ended in flames. I don't think that's a good idea, he said honestly. Probably not, Vivian agreed, but the offer stands. Daniel left before he could say something stupid. The drive home took 20 minutes. He spent all 20 thinking about the way Vivian had looked at him, like he was interesting, like his admission of loneliness hadn't been weakness, but honesty she recognized. His apartment felt smaller when he got back. The check engine light still glowed. The dryer still made angry noises. The bakery client still hadn't paid their invoice. But something had shifted. Some small crack had formed in the careful routine he'd built, the controlled life that kept him functional but not particularly alive. His phone buzzed. Ryan again. "Did you drop off the backpack?" "Yeah, all set," Daniel typed back. "Did you meet my mom?" Daniel stared at the question. Thought about the towel, the coffee, the conversation that had veered into territory he hadn't expected. Briefly, he finally sent. "Sorry if she was weird. She can be intense. She was fine," Daniel wrote. Then, because Ryan was his best friend and lying felt wrong. Actually kind of interesting. Interesting how? Just different than I expected. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Be careful with that one, man. My mother is complicated." "Noted," Daniel sent back. But the warning came too late. He was already thinking about when Ryan would be out of town again. Already wondering if he could justify another visit. Already knowing he was walking towards something that would probably end badly but felt inevitable anyway. The afternoon passed. Daniel worked on a proposal for a restaurant redesign, picked up Mia from the bus stop, helped with homework, made spaghetti for dinner. Normal. Routine. Safe. But that night, after Mia was asleep and the apartment was quiet and the loneliness settled in the way it always did, Daniel found himself thinking about Vivian's question. "Are you lonely?" And for the first time in years, he'd admitted the truth out loud. That admission felt like opening a door he'd kept carefully locked. Behind it was everything he'd been avoiding. The desire for connection, for conversation that mattered, for someone who saw him as more than Mia's dad or Ryan's friend or the freelancer who needed another week on the invoice. Vivian had seen him, really seen him, in 15 minutes of conversation that should have been awkward, but instead felt like the most honest interaction he'd had in months. His phone sat on the coffee table. He could text Ryan, ask casually when he'd be traveling next, make up some excuse about needing to drop off something else. He picked up the phone, put it down, picked it up again. This is stupid, he told himself. But he was already composing the message. "Hey, random question. When are you heading to Tampa again?" Ryan's response came quickly. "Next Thursday." "Why?" Daniel stared at the screen. This was the moment. He could back out, make up something about scheduling, pretend he wasn't already planning his next visit to a house he had no business being in. "Just curious," he typed. "Let me know if you need me to check on anything while you're gone. You're the best. My mom's usually not home during the day if you need to grab anything from my place." "Good to know," Daniel sent back. He set down the phone and stared at the ceiling, knowing exactly what he was doing and doing it anyway. This was how disaster started. Small choices that felt harmless in the moment but built into something that couldn't be undone. Vivian Hart was his best friend's mother. A billionaire. Someone living in a completely different world, getting involved, even as friends, even as fellow lonely people seeking connection, was asking for complications he couldn't afford. But he was going back. He knew it with absolute certainty. Next Thursday, he'd find a reason. Maybe Ryan would forget something again. Maybe Daniel would have a question about the house. Maybe he'd just be honest and admit he wanted another conversation that felt real. The loneliness he'd managed for so long suddenly felt unbearable. Vivian had cracked something open, and now he couldn't close it again. He thought about her standing in that kitchen, admitting her own isolation, looking at him like he might understand. And he did understand. Completely. That was the dangerous part. Understanding led to connection. Connection led to wanting more. And wanting more from Vivian Hart was the kind of mistake that could destroy the careful life he'd built. But as Daniel finally headed to bed, he wasn't thinking about the risks. He was thinking about the way she'd smiled when he admitted being lonely. The way her voice had softened when she talked about her empty house. The way she'd made him feel, for just a few minutes, like someone worth knowing. Next Thursday couldn't come fast enough, and that terrified him more than anything. Thursday arrived with the inevitability of bad decisions and good intentions colliding. Daniel woke up knowing exactly what he was going to do and hating himself for it in advance. Ryan had texted the night before confirming his Tampa trip, mentioning casually that he'd left some documents at his apartment again, asking if Daniel could possibly grab them. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor about enabling poor choices. Mia noticed something was off at breakfast. "You're doing the thing," she said around a mouthful of cereal. "What thing?" "The worry thing. With your face." Daniel touched his face reflexively. "I don't have a worry thing." "You totally do. Your eyebrows get all scrunchy." She demonstrated, wrinkling her forehead in an exaggerated expression that made her look like a very concerned elderly person. "Like that. Eat your cereal." "Are we out of money again?" The question hit harder than it should have. Daniel set down his coffee mug. "We're fine, sweetheart. I'm just thinking about work stuff." "You always say work stuff when something's wrong." "Nothing's wrong." Mia gave him a look that suggested she'd inherited some bullshit detector he hadn't been aware of passing down. 7 years old and already seeing through him. He was doomed when she hit 16. The school bus came on time, as always. Mia hugged him at the door, her backpack nearly as big as she was, and Daniel felt the familiar pang of guilt that came with every single decision he made. Was he being a good father? Was he doing enough? Would Mia look back on these years and remember love and stability, or would she remember stress and unpaid bills and a dad who was always tired? He pushed the thoughts away and drove to Ryan's apartment. The documents were exactly where Ryan said they'd be, along with a note that said, "You're a lifesaver," and a gift card to the coffee place Daniel liked. $25. Enough for 3 days of caffeine. Ryan was a good friend, the best friend Daniel had ever had, which made what he was about to do even worse. The drive to Vivian's house felt longer this time, probably because Daniel spent the entire trip talking himself out of it and then right back into it. He didn't have to go inside. He could leave the documents in the mailbox. He could text Ryan that the delivery was complete and drive away and never think about Vivian Hart's dark eyes or the way she'd looked at him like he mattered. He could do all of that. He pulled into the circular driveway instead. The door code still worked. The house still looked like something from an architecture magazine. Daniel stood in the entryway holding Ryan's documents, listening to the silence, wondering if Vivian was even home. "You came back." Her voice came from somewhere deeper in the house. Daniel followed it to a room he hadn't seen before, a study or home office lined with bookshelves, dominated by a massive desk covered in papers and open laptops. Vivian sat in the middle of it all, wearing reading glasses and an expression of mild frustration. "Ryan forgot something else," Daniel said, holding up the folder. "Ryan forgets everything. It's his defining characteristic." Vivian removed the glasses, set them on the desk. "Though I'm starting to suspect he's doing it on purpose." "Why would he do that?" "Because he thinks I'm lonely and you're lonely, and maybe we should be lonely together instead of separately." She stood up, moved around the desk. "He's not subtle. Never has been." Daniel's stomach dropped. "He said something to you?" "Not explicitly, but I've known him for 30 years. I can read between the lines." Vivian crossed her arms, studying him. "The question is whether you're here because Ryan manipulated you into it, or because you actually wanted to come back." The honest answer felt dangerous. Daniel went with it anyway. "Both, probably. At least you're truthful." She gestured toward the door. "Coffee? Or are you going to run away again?" "I didn't run away last time." "You absolutely ran away. Your exit was extremely fast for someone who claimed to not be uncomfortable." "I was uncomfortable." "And now?" Daniel looked at her, really looked at her. No towel this time, just jeans and an oversized sweater that made her look softer than the Forbes profile photos. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and there were papers stuck to her socks, probably from static electricity. She looked human, approachable, dangerous, still uncomfortable, he admitted. "But I came back anyway." "Why?" "Because you were right about the loneliness. And I can't remember the last time someone asked me a real question that wasn't about web design or parent-teacher conferences or whether I could pick up milk on the way home." Vivian's expression softened. Kitchen, coffee, now. The kitchen looked different in daylight streaming through the massive windows. Less intimidating, more lived in. There were coffee rings on the marble counter, a stack of mail that hadn't been opened, a wilted plant on the windowsill that someone had forgotten to water. "Don't judge the plant," Vivian said, following his gaze. "I'm excellent at keeping businesses alive. Vegetation, not so much." "When did you last water it?" "I genuinely don't know. June?" "It's October." "That explains a lot." She poured coffee into 2 mugs. The same mugs as last time, Daniel noticed. Do you want to save it? The plant. If you're into that kind of thing. I can barely keep my own life alive. I'm not qualified for plant rescue. Fair enough. Vivian handed him the coffee, leaned against the counter in the same spot as before, like they were already establishing patterns, rituals, a routine that had no business existing. So, web design, tell me about it. Why? Because I'm interested. You're a venture capitalist. You invest in tech startups. My freelance web design business is probably the least interesting thing you could possibly learn about. Try me. So Daniel told her. About the feast or famine cycle, the clients who paid on time and the ones who didn't, the constant hustle for the next project. He told her about the restaurant owner who'd paid him in gift certificates instead of cash, which had actually worked out because he and Mia had eaten well for a month. He told her about the nonprofit he'd done work for pro bono because their mission mattered more than his bank account. Vivian listened without interrupting, her focus absolute in a way that made Daniel understand how she'd built an empire. When she paid attention, you felt it. You're undercharging, she said when he finished. I charge what the market will bear. You charge what you think you're worth, which is significantly less than your actual value. She set down her mug. That restaurant site you mentioned, the one with the gift certificates. I looked it up last night. You looked up my work? I was curious. The site is excellent. Clean design, intuitive navigation, loads fast on mobile. You should be charging 3 times what you probably charge them. Daniel felt heat creep up his neck. I can't charge prices people won't pay. You can if you target different clients. Right now you're competing in the budget market because that's what you think you deserve. But your work is premium quality. You should be working with premium clients. I don't have access to those clients. You do now. Vivian pulled out her phone, typed something quickly. I'm sending you 3 contacts. Business owners I know who need website overhauls. Tell them I referred you. Charge them properly. Don't undervalue yourself because you're afraid of rejection. Daniel's phone buzzed 3 times in rapid succession. He stared at it, then at Vivian. Why are you doing this? Because you're talented and you're selling yourself short. And because Ryan would kill me if I let his best friend struggle when I could help. This feels like charity. It's not charity. It's a referral. You still have to do the work. You still have to be good enough to keep them as clients. I'm just opening the door. Whether you walk through it is up to you. She paused. Though if you turn it down because of pride, I'm going to be extremely disappointed. Daniel looked at the contacts on his phone, recognized 2 of the names from Business News. These weren't small potatoes. These were the kind of clients who could change everything. I don't know what to say. Say thank you and then actually follow up with them. Don't let fear make you small. Thank you. You're welcome. Vivian refilled both their mugs without asking. Now tell me about Mia. Ryan says she's brilliant. The conversation shifted, became easier. Daniel found himself talking about his daughter in ways he usually didn't. Not just the proud parent stuff, but the real things. How Mia asked questions that didn't have easy answers. How she'd been devastated when her best friend moved away last year and had handled it with more grace than most adults. How she sometimes asked about her mother and Daniel never knew what to say. What do you tell her? Vivian asked. The truth. That her mom loved her but wasn't ready to be a parent. That some people aren't built for it and that's okay. Is it okay? No, but telling Mia that her mother is selfish and cruel won't help anyone. So I lie and call it okay. Vivian was quiet for a moment. Ryan's father left when Ryan was 3, took off for a younger woman and never looked back. Ryan doesn't remember him, which is probably for the best. You raised Ryan alone? With a lot of help and a lot of mistakes. I worked constantly, missed school events, paid for quality childcare, but couldn't buy back the time I wasn't there. She stared into her coffee. Ryan turned out well despite me, not because of me. I don't think that's true. You don't know what it was like. The guilt. Knowing I was choosing work over my kid and doing it anyway because the work mattered, because I was building something, because I couldn't be just a mother without losing myself entirely. Daniel heard the rawness in her voice, the old pain that hadn't quite healed. Did Ryan ever resent you for it? Probably. We don't talk about it much. We have this very polite relationship where we avoid the hard topics and pretend everything's fine. Vivian smiled without humor. Very healthy. Highly recommend it. Mia and I talk about everything, sometimes too much. Last week she asked me if I was sad that I don't have a girlfriend. What did you say? I said sometimes, yeah. And she said that was okay because she gets sad sometimes too, and being sad together is better than being sad alone. She's 7 and she's already smarter than most adults. She terrifies me, in the best way. They talked for another hour, then another. Daniel kept thinking he should leave, kept not leaving. The conversation wandered through childhood, mistakes, regrets, small victories. Vivian told him about the first company she'd built, how she'd mortgaged everything and nearly lost it all before a last-minute investment saved her. Daniel told her about the early days of single parenthood, when Mia was 2 and he had no idea what he was doing, and somehow they'd survived anyway. It was the kind of conversation Daniel hadn't had in years, maybe ever. The kind where you forget to perform, forget to manage the impression you're making, and just exist as yourself. His phone buzzed. Mia's school. Pickup time in 45 minutes. I have to go, Daniel said, surprised by how much he didn't want to. Same time next week? Vivian asked. Ryan might actually be here next week. The week after, then. Daniel stood up, carried his mug to the sink out of habit. Vivian moved to take it from him, and their hands touched. It was brief, incidental, meaningless. Except it wasn't. Vivian felt it too. He saw it in the way she pulled back slightly, the way her expression shifted into something guarded. This is complicated, she said quietly. Yeah. Ryan can't know. I know. I'm not... She stopped, started again. I don't know what this is, but it's not nothing. Daniel's heart was pounding in a way that felt both absurd and inevitable. It's coffee and conversation. Is that what we're calling it? It's all it can be. You're right. Vivian crossed her arms, putting distance between them, even though she hadn't moved. You should go. Mia needs you. Daniel left before he could say something stupid. The drive to Mia's school passed in a blur. He sat in the pickup line watching other parents, wondering if any of them were carrying around the feeling he had, like something fundamental had shifted and there was no way to shift it back. Mia climbed into the car full of energy and stories about her day. Daniel listened, responded, drove home on autopilot, made dinner, helped with homework, did all the normal things while feeling completely abnormal inside. That night, after Mia was asleep, Daniel sat on the couch and stared at his phone. He should text Ryan, tell him the documents had been delivered. He should reach out to the contacts Vivian had sent. He should do literally anything except think about Vivian. He thought about Vivian, about the way she'd looked at him when their hands touched, the way her voice had changed when she said, "It's not nothing," the way she'd somehow become the most interesting person in his carefully controlled world. This was dangerous. This was stupid. This was going to end badly. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. It's Vivian. Ryan gave me your number months ago. Never had a reason to use it until now. Daniel stared at the message. He could ignore it. Should ignore it. Every instinct screamed that engaging would be a mistake. Hey, he typed back. I've been thinking about what you said, about it being just coffee and conversation. And? I think we're lying to ourselves. Daniel's hands were shaking. He set the phone down, picked it up again, typed and deleted 4 different responses before settling on, probably. So what do we do? The question hung there, impossible to answer honestly. What they should do was stop. What they should do was put distance between themselves and this thing that was already becoming bigger than either of them could control. I don't know, Daniel sent. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, me neither. But I'd like to find out. Daniel closed his eyes. Thought about Mia sleeping down the hall. Thought about Ryan, his best friend, who trusted him. Thought about all the ways this could go wrong. We should be careful, he typed. Very careful, Vivian agreed. Ryan can't know. No one can know. Daniel knew how this sounded. Like an affair. Like something shameful and hidden. But it wasn't that. Not yet. It was just 2 lonely people finding something real in each other. Something that happened to be complicated by circumstances. At least that's what he told himself. Same time in 2 weeks, Vivian sent. I'll find a reason. You don't need a reason. Just come. Daniel set down his phone before he could respond. This was happening. Whatever this was, it was happening, and he was letting it happen, and some part of him was glad. The next 2 weeks crawled by with the particular slowness of anticipation. Daniel threw himself into work, reached out to the contacts Vivian had sent. 2 of them responded immediately. One wanted a complete website overhaul, budget generous enough to make Daniel's hands shake when he wrote the proposal. The other needed a rush job, willing to pay premium rates for fast turnaround. Suddenly, Daniel's famine period was a feast. He worked late nights after Mia went to bed, designing and coding and pouring himself into projects that actually challenged him. The restaurant client loved their site so much, they referred him to 3 other businesses. The dryer got fixed, the electric bill got paid, the check engine light finally got addressed. Ryan called midway through the second week. "Dude, what did you say to my mom?" Daniel's stomach dropped. "What?" "She's been weird, happy weird. Asked about you twice. My mother never asks about anyone twice." "What happened?" "Nothing happened. I dropped off your stuff. We talked for like 10 minutes. She said you were interesting." "That's not weird." "For my mother it is. She doesn't find people interesting. She finds them useful or irrelevant." Ryan paused. "You didn't charm her or something, did you?" "How would I possibly charm your mother?" "I don't know, man. With your whole decent guy thing, women eat that up." "Your mother is not women. She's a billionaire CEO who could buy and sell me without noticing." "True. Okay, maybe I'm paranoid. She's just been different lately. Lighter. It's freaking me out." Daniel felt guilt settle in his chest like a stone. Maybe she's just in a good mood. "My mother doesn't do good moods. She does productive moods and strategic moods and occasionally vengeful moods, but not good moods. People change." "Not Vivian Hart." Ryan laughed. "Anyway, I'm heading to Atlanta next week for a conference, 3 days. Can you check on her? Make sure she's not dead in that giant house?" The universe was definitely laughing at him now. "You want me to check on your mom?" "Just text her or something. She won't answer if I do it, but she might for you since you're apparently interesting." "That's not... I don't think... Come on, man. I'm worried about her. She works too hard and never takes care of herself. Just send a text, see if she's okay." Daniel could say no, should say no. Instead, he heard himself saying, "Yeah, okay, I'll check on her. You're the best. I owe you." The call ended. Daniel sat staring at his phone, knowing exactly what he'd just agreed to and knowing it had nothing to do with checking on Vivian's welfare. He texted her that night after Mia was asleep. "Ryan asked me to check on you while he's in Atlanta next week." "Did he now? Apparently you've been in a good mood and it's concerning." "I'm not allowed to be in a good mood?" "According to Ryan, it's out of character." "Maybe I have a reason to be in a good mood." Daniel stared at the message, trying to decide if she meant what he thought she meant. "Do you?" he sent. "I've been looking forward to 2 weeks from now. Does that count as a reason?" Heat spread through Daniel's chest. This was flirting. They were definitely flirting, over text, about seeing each other, while her son, his best friend, was in another city. "That counts," he typed. "Good. Then I'll see you Tuesday afternoon. 2 p.m. work? I'll be there. Don't bring documents this time. Just bring yourself." Daniel set down his phone and put his head in his hands. He was doing this, actually doing this, getting involved with his best friend's mother, a woman completely out of his league, in a situation that had disaster written all over it. And he couldn't wait. Tuesday arrived with the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade. Daniel dropped Mia at school, worked through the morning on the Rush project, and at 1:45 found himself driving toward Vivian's house with no excuse except wanting to be there. The door code worked. He didn't use it. Instead, he knocked, suddenly aware that walking in uninvited felt presumptuous now that this was something more than document delivery. Vivian opened the door wearing jeans and a black t-shirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger than before. Nervous, maybe. Or maybe that was just Daniel projecting. "You knocked," she said. Seemed polite. "It's your code too now. You don't have to knock." "That feels too familiar. And what we're doing isn't." "Fair point." Daniel stepped inside. The house smelled like coffee and something else. Bread, maybe. Homemade bread. "Did you bake?" he asked. "Don't sound so surprised. I know how to bake." "You run a venture capital firm." "I can do both." Vivian led him to the kitchen where, sure enough, A loaf of bread sat cooling on the counter. I stress bake. It's either this or yelling at people, and the bread is more productive. What are you stressed about? She looked at him directly. You, this, what we're doing. Daniel appreciated the honesty even as it made his chest tight. We're not doing anything wrong. We're not doing anything right either. We're two adults having coffee and conversation. Is that still what we're calling it? They stood on opposite sides of the kitchen island, the bread between them, tension thick enough to cut. Daniel knew this moment mattered. They could step back, keep it casual, maintain the fiction that this was innocent, or they could acknowledge what was actually happening. I think about you, Daniel said quietly. More than I should. More than makes sense. Vivian's expression shifted. I rearranged my entire schedule so I'd be free Tuesday afternoon. Told my assistant I had a personal appointment. I never have personal appointments. So we're both idiots. Apparently. Ryan's your son, my best friend. I'm aware. I'm a broke freelancer with a 7-year-old. You're... Daniel gestured vaguely. You. Also aware. This is a terrible idea. The worst. Vivian moved around the island, closing the distance between them. And I can't stop thinking about it anyway. She was close enough now that Daniel could smell her shampoo, something clean and expensive. Close enough that he could see the tiny scar on her chin, the gray hairs she hadn't bothered to dye, the vulnerability in her eyes that probably nobody else ever got to see. We should stop, Daniel said. We should. Neither of them moved. I don't want to hurt Ryan, Daniel said. Neither do I. But I also don't want to walk away from this. Neither do I. Vivian reached out, touched his hand where it rested on the counter, just her fingers against his, barely contact at all. Daniel's entire nervous system lit up like she'd hit him with electricity. We go slow, Vivian said. We're careful. We figure out what this is before we let it become more than we can handle. Can we do that? Go slow? I don't know, but we can try. Daniel turned his hand over, laced his fingers through hers. The gesture felt enormous, weighted with meaning it shouldn't have. They were just holding hands. People held hands all the time. It was nothing. It was everything. They stood like that for a long moment, connected by just their hands, both of them knowing they'd crossed a line, but not willing to step back over it. Coffee? Vivian asked finally. Coffee, Daniel agreed. She pulled away to pour, and Daniel felt the loss of contact like a physical thing. They were in trouble. Deep trouble. The kind that didn't have easy solutions. But as Vivian handed him a mug and smiled, really smiled, the kind of smile that transformed her entire face, Daniel couldn't bring himself to care about the trouble they were courting. For the first time in years, he felt alive. And that was worth almost any risk. They sat at the kitchen table with coffee and fresh bread that Vivian sliced thick and served with butter that actually tasted like something. Daniel couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten bread that hadn't come from a plastic bag. This is really good, he said. Don't sound so shocked. I'm not shocked. I'm just... You bake bread from scratch. You run a venture capital firm. You're your own person and also someone's mother and also apparently a baker. It's a lot. Vivian laughed and the sound did something to Daniel's chest that felt dangerous. I contain multitudes, very exhausting multitudes. Tell me about the firm, what you actually do all day. You don't want to hear about venture capital. I asked, didn't I? So Vivian told him. About the startups she evaluated, the pitches she heard, the impossible task of predicting which passionate founder would actually deliver and which would crash spectacularly. She told him about the companies she'd invested in that had failed, the ones that had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, the strange alchemy of money and vision and timing that made some businesses soar while others collapsed. She talked like someone who genuinely loved what she did, even when it frustrated her. Daniel watched her hands move as she spoke, watched the way her expression shifted between thoughtful and amused and occasionally ruthless. You're good at it, he said when she paused. I am, which is part of the problem. How is being good at your job a problem? Because it's all I have. Work is easy. Work makes sense. You put in effort. You get results. People are messier. She broke off a piece of bread, didn't eat it. Ryan thinks I chose work over him. Maybe I did, but it felt like survival at the time. Single mother, no safety net, terrified of ending up dependent on someone again. So I worked and worked and kept working until one day I looked up and realized I'd built this enormous empire and forgotten to build a life. Daniel understood that more than he wanted to admit. I do the same thing, different scale, same pattern. Work until Mia's asleep, work some more, fall into bed exhausted so I don't have to think about everything I'm not doing. Like what? Like dating, like having friends outside of Ryan, like being a person instead of just Mia's dad and the guy who fixes websites. He met Vivian's eyes. Like feeling something other than tired and vaguely anxious all the time. And now? Now I'm sitting in a billionaire's kitchen eating homemade bread and feeling more awake than I have in years, which is terrifying. Why terrifying? Because I could get used to this. To you. And that's dangerous. Vivian set down her coffee mug carefully. Daniel, I need to be honest about something. His stomach tightened. Okay. I haven't done this in a very long time. Dating, connecting, whatever we're calling this. The last relationship I had was 5 years ago. Lasted 3 months before he got tired of competing with my schedule. Before that, it was another 3 years of nothing. She looked away. I'm not good at this. At letting people in. At being vulnerable. I built walls so high, I forgot how to let anyone climb them. I'm not asking you to tear down your walls. What are you asking? Daniel thought about it. I'm asking for what we're already doing. Coffee and conversation. Honesty. The feeling that I matter to someone outside of what I can provide or fix or design. You matter, Vivian said quietly. Already. Which is fast and probably stupid, but it's true. The confession hung between them, too honest to take back. Daniel reached across the table, took her hand again. This time she held on. Ryan's going to find out eventually, he said. I know. He's going to lose his mind. Probably. He might never forgive me. He might not forgive either of us. Vivian's grip tightened. But I'm tired of making every decision based on what other people need. For once, I want to choose something just because it makes me happy, even if it's selfish. Is that what this is? Selfish? Isn't it? Daniel didn't have an answer. Maybe it was selfish. Maybe they were both just tired and lonely and grabbing onto the first real connection they'd found in years. Maybe it would all blow up spectacularly and hurt everyone involved. But Vivian's hand was warm in his, and the afternoon light was streaming through the windows. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Daniel felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. They talked for 3 hours. The bread disappeared. The coffee got refilled twice. Conversation wandered from childhood to mistakes to dreams that hadn't quite died but had gotten buried under responsibility and fear. Vivian told him about growing up poor, about the scholarship that had gotten her into college, about working 3 jobs while pregnant with Ryan and refusing to give up even when it would have been easier. Daniel told her about his parents, who died in a car accident when he was 25, about meeting Mia's mother at a bar and thinking he'd found something real only to discover she'd been looking for an escape, not a partner. Do you regret it? Vivian asked. Having Mia with someone who left? Never. Mia's the best thing that ever happened to me. Her mother leaving was awful, but it also meant I got to raise my daughter without constant fighting and resentment. Sometimes the hard thing is also the right thing. I wish I'd understood that earlier, with Ryan's father. I wasted years trying to make it work with someone who fundamentally didn't want the same life I did. What did he want? A wife who stayed home and stayed quiet. Someone decorative who didn't have opinions or ambitions. When I started the business, he called it a hobby. When I got my first major client, he said I was neglecting our son. When I made my first million, he left for a 22-year-old yoga instructor. Vivian smiled without humor. Best thing he ever did for me, honestly. Freed me up to build something that actually mattered. Does Ryan know that story? The sanitized version. Not the part about his father calling me difficult and demanding and unfeminine because I wanted more than being someone's accessory. Daniel felt a surge of anger toward a man he'd never met. He was an idiot. He was a product of his generation and his expectations. But yes, also an idiot. The conversation shifted again, became lighter. Vivian asked about Mia's interests, and Daniel found himself pulling up photos on his phone. Mia at her last soccer game, covered in mud and grinning like she'd won the World Cup. Mia's science fair project, a volcano that had worked a little too well and covered half the gymnasium in baking soda foam. Mia asleep on the couch with a book still open on her chest. "She's beautiful," Vivian said. "She has your eyes." "Poor kid. Don't do that. You have good eyes. Honest eyes." Vivian handed back the phone. "Does she ask about her mother?" "Sometimes. Usually around Mother's Day or when someone at school mentions their mom. I tell her the truth as much as I can without making her feel unwanted." That's a hard balance. Everything about parenting is a hard balance. You love them so much it physically hurts, and you're constantly terrified you're screwing them up in ways they'll talk about in therapy 20 years from now. "I'm pretty sure Ryan's already got a therapist lined up to discuss me," Vivian said dryly. "The workaholic mother who missed his school plays and forgot his birthday twice." "You forgot his birthday?" "Once when he was 9 and I was closing a major deal. Once when he was 14 and I was in Tokyo for investor meetings. Both times he said it was fine. Neither time was it actually fine." "Have you talked to him about it?" "We don't really talk about real things. We discuss his work, my work, surface topics. Nothing that requires actual vulnerability." She looked at Daniel, "Which is why what you and I are doing feels so strange. We barely know each other and we're already past the surface." "Maybe that's easier sometimes. No history to navigate around, no established patterns to break. Maybe." Vivian stood, started clearing the coffee mugs. "Or maybe I'm just tired of pretending I have everything figured out when I very clearly don't." Daniel helped her clean up, their movements falling into an easy rhythm that shouldn't have existed yet somehow did. He washed, she dried. Their hands brushed occasionally. Neither of them acknowledged it. His phone buzzed. "Mia's school, 15 minutes until pickup." "I have to go," Daniel said, drying his hands on a towel that probably cost more than his entire kitchen. "I know." They stood in the kitchen, neither moving toward the door. The air felt charged with possibility and restraint in equal measure. "When can I see you again?" Vivian asked. "Ryan gets back from Atlanta on Friday." "So not until he leaves again." "Probably safer that way." "I'm tired of safe," Daniel laughed despite himself. "Says the woman who built her entire career on calculated risk assessment. That's business. This is different." "Is it?" "You know it is." She was right. This was nothing like business. This was messy and complicated and potentially catastrophic. This was two people who should know better, doing it anyway. Daniel stepped closer. Vivian didn't step back. They were inches apart now, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, close enough to feel the heat between them. "We should be careful," he said. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." And yet here we are, not being careful at all. Daniel's heart was hammering. Every instinct screamed at him to close the distance, to kiss her, to find out if the chemistry he felt was real or just the product of loneliness and wishful thinking. But Mia was waiting. Ryan was his best friend. This moment had consequences that extended far beyond the two of them. "Next Tuesday," he said, forcing himself to step back. "Same time." "That's a week away." "I know." "That's too long." "Probably, but it's what we can manage." Vivian nodded slowly. "Okay, Tuesday. But Daniel?" "Yeah?" "We need to talk about what happens when this becomes more than coffee and conversation. Because it will. We both know it will." Daniel couldn't argue with that. The pull between them was too strong, too real. They were heading somewhere that would require decisions neither of them was ready to make. "We'll figure it out," he said, with more confidence than he felt. "Will we?" "We have to." He left before the moment could stretch any further. The drive to Mia's school passed in a blur of conflicting emotions. Guilt, excitement, fear, anticipation. He was playing with fire. He knew it. And still he couldn't wait for Tuesday. Mia climbed into the car, chattering about her day, oblivious to the fact that her father's entire world had tilted on its axis. Daniel listened, responded appropriately, drove home and made dinner and helped with homework like a normal person living a normal life. But nothing felt normal anymore. That night, after Mia was asleep, Daniel sat on the couch with his laptop open to a web design project he couldn't focus on. His phone sat next to him, dark and silent. He shouldn't text Vivian. They'd just spent 3 hours together. He should give it space, maintain some distance, not act like a teenager with his first crush. His phone lit up. I'm not good at waiting. Vivian. Daniel smiled despite himself. It's been 2 hours. Exactly. 2 hours too long. We just saw each other. I know. I'm being ridiculous. You can tell me to stop. Daniel stared at the message. He should tell her to stop. Should establish boundaries before this got more out of control than it already was. I don't want you to stop, he typed instead. Good. Because I'm really bad at following instructions anyway. I'm learning that about you. What else are you learning? Daniel thought about the afternoon. About the way Vivian had talked about her failures with the same honesty she talked about her successes. About the bread baking and the forgotten plant and the admission that she was tired of being alone. That you're more human than you let people see, he sent. Is that good or bad? It's real. I like real. Even when real is complicated, especially then. There was a pause. Then, I keep thinking about this afternoon, about standing in the kitchen with you. Daniel's chest tightened. Me too. About what almost happened. What almost happened? Don't make me say it. I'm not making you do anything. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, I almost kissed you. There it was, out in the open, the thing they'd both been thinking but hadn't acknowledged. I know, Daniel typed. Would you have let me? The question felt enormous, loaded with implications that went far beyond a simple yes or no. Yes, Daniel sent, because lying felt worse than admitting the truth. We can't. I know. Ryan would never forgive either of us. I know that too, but I still want to. Daniel set down his phone and put his head in his hands. This was spiraling faster than he could control. They'd gone from strangers to friends to something undefined in the space of 3 meetings. The smart thing would be to pump the brakes, slow down, think about consequences. He picked up his phone. What are we doing, Vivian? I don't know, but I can't stop thinking about you. Same. This is a terrible idea. You keep saying that, because it keeps being true. Daniel took a breath, made a decision that might be the worst one he'd ever made. I don't care anymore about it being a terrible idea. I just care about seeing you again. Tuesday feels very far away. It's 4 days. Like I said, very far. They texted for another hour. Nothing important, nothing earth-shattering. Just the kind of late-night conversation that happened when 2 people couldn't quite let go of each other. Vivian told him about a disastrous pitch meeting where the founder had literally fallen asleep mid-presentation. Daniel told her about Mia's latest obsession with sharks and how she'd spent an entire weekend reorganizing her stuffed animals by marine habitat. It was easy, comfortable, dangerous. Finally, close to midnight, Vivian sent, I should let you sleep, probably, but I don't want to. What do you want? The question was out before Daniel could stop it. Too open, too vulnerable, asking for something he wasn't sure either of them was ready to give. Honestly, I want to stop thinking about what everyone else needs and focus on what I need. And right now, I need to see where this goes. With you. Daniel's heart was pounding again, even though it's complicated, especially because it's complicated. The easy things in my life are all empty. Maybe the complicated thing is the one that actually matters. And if it blows up, then it blows up. But at least I'll have tried. Daniel thought about Ryan, about their friendship, 15 years strong, built on trust and shared history and showing up for each other, about how betrayed Ryan would feel if he knew what was happening, about how some violations couldn't be forgiven. He thought about Vivian, about the way she looked at him like he was worth knowing, about the conversations that went deeper than anything he'd experienced in years, about the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he'd found something real. Tuesday, he sent. We'll figure it out Tuesday. Okay. Tuesday. Good night, Daniel. Good night. He set down his phone and stared at the ceiling. Sleep felt impossible. His mind was racing with possibilities and consequences, desire and guilt, the certain knowledge that he was making a choice that would change everything. But he was making it anyway. The next 4 days were torture. Daniel threw himself into work, trying to distract himself from counting down the hours until Tuesday. The Rush project wrapped up ahead of schedule. The client with the generous budget approved his proposal and sent a deposit that made Daniel's bank account look healthier than it had in years. Everything was falling into place professionally. Personally, he was a mess. Ryan called Thursday night, back from Atlanta and full of stories about the conference. Daniel listened, laughed at the right moments, felt guilt gnaw at him with every word. "You should come out with me tomorrow night," Ryan said. "There's a new bar downtown. We haven't done a guys' night in forever. I've got Mia. So get a sitter. Come on, man. We barely see each other anymore. We saw each other 2 weeks ago. For lunch, that doesn't count. I mean, actually hang out, drink beer, talk about things that aren't work or kids." Daniel felt the walls closing in. "I don't know, Ryan. I've got a lot on my plate right now." "You always have a lot on your plate. Take a night off. Live a little. Let me check with the sitter. I'll text you." "You better. I'm not taking no for an answer." The call ended. Daniel sat holding his phone, knowing he should go, knowing it would look weird if he didn't, knowing that sitting across from Ryan while hiding what was happening with Vivian would be its own special kind of torture. He texted the sitter. She was available. He texted Ryan back, confirming. Then he texted Vivian. "Going out with Ryan tomorrow night. Feel like I'm living a double life. Welcome to my world. I've been hiding things from him for 30 years. That's different. You're his mother. I'm his best friend. And what are you to me?" The question stopped Daniel cold. What was he to Vivian? They weren't dating, weren't sleeping together, weren't even officially anything. They were just two people who talked and felt something that neither of them could quite name. "I don't know," he sent honestly. "Me neither, but I want to find out." "Still on for Tuesday?" "Absolutely." "Good. Try to enjoy tomorrow night. Don't let guilt ruin it." Easier said than done. "I know, but Ryan deserves to have his friend there. Don't pull away from him because of me." She was right. Daniel knew she was right. Whatever was happening between him and Vivian, Ryan didn't deserve to lose his best friend over it. Friday night came. The sitter arrived. Mia was thrilled at the prospect of extra screen time and pizza. Daniel drove downtown feeling like he was heading to his own execution. Ryan was already in the bar, 2 beers on the table, grinning like they were still in college instead of pushing their mid-30s. There he is. The hermit emerges from his cave. "I'm not a hermit. You're hermit adjacent. When's the last time you did something that wasn't work or Mia related?" Daniel thought about Tuesday afternoons with Vivian. Recently, actually. "Oh yeah, like what?" "Just meeting new people, having conversations." Ryan's eyebrows went up. "Is this about a woman? Are you dating someone?" "No, I mean, not exactly. It's complicated." "Complicated how?" Daniel took a long drink of beer, buying time. "It's not dating. It's just talking to someone, getting to know them." "But you like them." "Yeah, I like them." "So why complicated?" "Because she's your mother. Because this has disaster written all over it. Because I'm betraying your trust with every conversation, every text, every moment I spend thinking about her, instead of putting distance between us." "Timing's bad," Daniel said instead. "Other circumstances make it tricky." "Like what circumstances?" "Just trust me when I say it's complicated." Ryan studied him for a long moment. "You're being weird." "I'm always weird. Weirder than usual, but okay, I won't push. Just promise me you're not getting involved with someone who's going to hurt you." "I can't promise that." "Why not?" "Because caring about anyone means risking getting hurt. That's how it works." Ryan shook his head. "When did you get so philosophical?" "I've always been philosophical. You just never noticed because you're too busy talking." "Fair." Ryan flagged down the server, ordered another round. "Speaking of talking, my mom asked about you again." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What did she say?" "Just asked if you were doing okay. If your business was going well." Weird questions for her. She usually doesn't care about my friends. Maybe she's trying to be more involved in your life. Or maybe you charmed her somehow, and now she thinks you're interesting. Ryan laughed, which would be hilarious because my mother doesn't think anyone's interesting except other billionaires, and maybe her financial advisor. I'm not that interesting. I know that. You know that. But apparently Vivian Hart disagrees. Ryan's expression turned more serious. She's been different lately. Lighter, I guess. Less stressed. I was telling her she should date someone, actually have a life outside of work. Daniel nearly choked on his beer. You told your mother to date? Why not? She's been alone for years. She deserves to be happy. Probably won't listen to me, but I figured it was worth suggesting. And what did she say? That she'd think about it, which means no, but in polite Vivian speak. Ryan leaned back in his chair. I worry about her sometimes. She's got everything anyone could want except actual human connection. That's got to be lonely. It probably is. You'd like her, actually, if you got to know her beyond the billionaire CEO thing. She's funny, smart as hell. Doesn't take crap from anyone. Ryan smiled. She raised me by herself while building an empire. That's pretty badass. Guilt twisted in Daniel's chest like a knife. She sounds like a good person. She is. Complicated, but good. Ryan's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned. Work thing. Give me 5 minutes? He stepped outside to take the call. Daniel sat alone at the table, drowning in guilt and confusion and the growing certainty that this situation was unsustainable. He couldn't keep lying to Ryan, couldn't keep sneaking around behind his best friend's back, couldn't build something real with Vivian while hiding it from the one person who connected them. But he also couldn't walk away. Ryan came back looking frustrated. Sorry about that. Client having a meltdown over nothing. Everything okay? Yeah, just annoying. Where were we? Talking about your mom. Right. Anyway, do me a favor. If you do talk to her again, maybe encourage her to actually have a life. She listens to other people better than she listens to me. Daniel felt like he was in a nightmare. I'll keep that in mind. The rest of the night passed in a blur of conversation Daniel barely tracked. He laughed at Ryan's stories, shared a few of his own, played the role of best friend while feeling like a complete fraud. By the time he got home, his jaw hurt from forced smiling and his chest felt tight with suppressed anxiety. The sitter left. Mia was asleep. Daniel sat in the dark living room and pulled out his phone. Just got back from drinks with Ryan, he texted Vivian. How was it? Awful. He talked about you, about how he wants you to date someone, how you deserve to be happy. Oh, I felt like the worst person alive. You're not. We haven't done anything wrong, haven't we? There was a long pause. Then, do you want to stop? Before this goes further? Daniel stared at the question. This was the moment. He could end it now, walk away, preserve his friendship with Ryan, avoid the inevitable disaster. It would hurt, but it would be clean, safe, the right thing to do. No, he typed. I don't want to stop. Even knowing how complicated it's going to get, especially knowing that you're either very brave or very stupid. Probably stupid. Good. I don't trust brave people. They make terrible decisions. Despite everything, Daniel smiled. What are you doing right now? Sitting in my office, pretending to review contracts, actually just thinking about Tuesday. It's 3 days away. I know. Stop reminding me. We could move it up. Ryan's in town. Too risky. Sunday night? After Mia's asleep? Another pause. Longer. Daniel could almost feel Vivian thinking through the implications. That's a bad idea, she finally sent. I know. If we're going to do this, we need to be smart about it. I know that too, but you still want to see me Sunday. Yes. Why? Because waiting 3 more days feels impossible. The confession hung there, raw and honest. Daniel held his breath. Okay, Vivian sent. Sunday, 9 p.m. But just for an hour. We need to talk about what happens next. Agreed. And Daniel? Yeah? This is the point where we either pull back or commit to whatever this becomes. You understand that, right? I understand. Okay. See you Sunday. Daniel set down his phone and closed his eyes. He'd just committed to something that would change everything. There was no going back now. Sunday night, he and Vivian would have to figure out if this was real enough to risk everything for, or if they needed to walk away before someone got hurt. He already knew his answer. The question was whether Vivian's matched. Sunday arrived wrapped in anxiety and anticipation in equal measure. Daniel spent the day in a state of controlled chaos, hyper-aware of every passing hour, every minute that brought him closer to 9 o'clock, and whatever conversation waited on the other side of it. Mia had a playdate in the morning, which meant Daniel spent 3 hours at another parent's house making small talk about school policies and youth soccer leagues while his mind was entirely somewhere else. He nodded at appropriate intervals, laughed when the other parents laughed, and felt like an actor playing the role of normal functioning adult, while his actual thoughts were consumed by a woman he had no business thinking about. By the time he got Mia home, fed her lunch, and settled her into the afternoon routine of homework and cartoons, Daniel's nerves were stretched thin. He tried to work on a client project, managed maybe 20 minutes of actual productivity before his mind wandered back to Vivian, to what they were going to say to each other, to what decisions needed to be made. His phone buzzed around 4. Ryan. Hey man, want to grab dinner tomorrow? There's a new burger place I want to try. Daniel stared at the message, guilt washing over him fresh and sharp. Here was Ryan, his best friend, completely oblivious to the fact that Daniel had spent the last 3 weeks getting emotionally entangled with his mother, just being a good friend, making plans, trying to maintain their connection while Daniel systematically undermined it. Sounds good, he typed back, because what else could he say? Awesome. 7 p.m. work? Perfect. The exchange was so normal it hurt. Daniel set down his phone and rubbed his face. This was unsustainable. Tonight he and Vivian needed to either figure out a path forward or end this before it went any further. There was no middle ground anymore. Evening came slowly, then all at once. Dinner with Mia, during which she talked nonstop about her friend's new puppy, and could they please get a puppy? Dad, please. She'd take care of it, she promised. Bath time, book time, the carefully structured routine that usually grounded Daniel, but tonight just felt like obstacles between him and where he needed to be. Finally, mercifully, Mia was asleep. Her breathing evened out, her small hand curled around her favorite stuffed elephant. Daniel stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her, feeling the weight of every choice he was making and how it might affect this small person who trusted him completely. He thought about his own parents, how they'd built their lives around each other and around him, how he'd always felt secure in their love even when money was tight or things were hard. He wanted that for Mia. Security, stability, the knowledge that her father made good choices. And yet here he was, about to drive to Vivian Hart's house at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night for a conversation that could either be the beginning of something real or the end of something that never should have started. Daniel grabbed his keys and left before he could talk himself out of it. The drive to Vivian's house was becoming familiar in a way that felt significant. He knew which streets to take, where the potholes were, which traffic light always took forever. The circular driveway, the imposing modern architecture, the door code that he'd memorized without trying, all of it was starting to feel less foreign and more like a destination. That thought terrified him more than he wanted to admit. He knocked instead of using the code. Some part of him still needed the formality, the permission, the acknowledgement that he was entering a space that didn't belong to him. Vivian opened the door wearing jeans and a Georgetown sweatshirt that looked older than Ryan. Her hair was pulled back messily, and she had her reading glasses perched on top of her head. She looked younger than usual, more vulnerable. "You knocked again," she said. "Old habits. Come in before someone sees you lurking on my doorstep." The house was quieter than usual, dimly lit, almost intimate. Vivian led him to the living room, a space he hadn't been in before, all comfortable furniture and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that actually held books instead of just decorative objects. It felt more personal than the kitchen, more like someone actually lived here. "Coffee?" Vivian asked. "At 9 p.m. I'll never sleep." "Wine, then?" "I'm driving. 1 glass won't kill you." She poured 2 glasses of red wine from a bottle that probably cost more than Daniel's car payment, handed him one, and sat on the opposite end of the couch. The distance felt deliberate, safe, like they both knew that sitting too close would make the conversation they needed to have impossible. "So," Vivian said. "So. We need to talk about what we're doing." "I know. And be honest about what we want." Daniel took a sip of wine. It was good. Of course it was good. Everything in Vivian's world was quality, carefully chosen, expensive. He didn't belong here. He knew that. And yet he couldn't make himself leave. "I've been thinking about this all week," Vivian continued, "about what it means, what it could become, what it would cost." She set down her glass. "I built my entire life around control. Careful decisions, strategic planning, minimizing risk, and this, you. None of it makes sense from a strategic standpoint." "Thanks, I think." "That's not an insult. It's just the truth. Getting involved with my son's best friend is objectively a terrible idea. The fallout alone could damage my relationship with Ryan, possibly permanently. It puts you in an impossible position. It violates about a dozen social conventions." She paused. "And I don't care." That's the part that scares me. I should care. I should walk away. But I don't want to. Daniel felt his chest tighten. What do you want? Honestly, I want to see where this goes. I want more afternoons of conversation that actually matters. I want to stop eating dinner alone and wondering what the point of everything is. I want... She stopped, started again. I want you. Whatever that means. However complicated it gets. The confession hung between them, raw and undefended. Daniel set down his own glass before he dropped it. Ryan called me today, he said. Wanted to make dinner plans. And I sat there texting him back, making plans like everything's normal, feeling like the worst friend in the world. You're not a bad friend. I'm lying to him. By omission, maybe, but still lying. We haven't done anything wrong. Haven't we? Daniel stood up, paced to the window, stared out at the dark yard. I'm falling for my best friend's mother. That feels pretty wrong. The silence behind him was absolute. He'd said it out loud. The thing they'd both been dancing around, falling for her. Not just interested, not just attracted, actually falling. Daniel, Vivian's voice was quiet. Look at me. He turned. She was standing now too, the couch between them, her expression unreadable. Say that again, she said. Which part? The falling part. Daniel's heart was hammering. I'm falling for you. Maybe you already fell, I don't know. All I know is that I think about you constantly, and I feel more alive talking to you than I have in years, and the thought of walking away makes me feel like I'm suffocating. Vivian moved around the couch, closing the distance between them. That's terrifying. I know. And reckless. I know that too. And probably going to end badly. Most likely. She was close enough to touch now. Close enough that Daniel could see the way her hands were shaking slightly, the vulnerability in her eyes that matched what he was feeling. I'm falling too, Vivian said quietly, and I don't know what to do about it. Daniel reached out, cupped her face in his hands. She leaned into the touch, her eyes closing for just a moment. When they opened again, they were bright with something that looked like tears. We tell Ryan, Daniel said. Eventually, when we figure out what this is, but we tell him the truth. He'll hate us. Maybe. Probably. But lying to him long-term is worse. Is there a long-term? Vivian asked. We've known each other 3 weeks. I know, it's fast, it's probably crazy, but it feels real. It does. She covered his hands with hers, held them against her face. Which is what makes this so dangerous. I could lose my son over this. And I could lose my best friend. So what do we do? Daniel didn't have a good answer. The smart thing would be to walk away, preserve the relationships that mattered, avoid the inevitable pain. But standing here with Vivian, feeling the warmth of her skin under his hands, seeing the way she looked at him like he was worth the risk, walking away felt impossible. We move forward, he said, carefully, honestly with each other, and when the time is right, we tell Ryan together. And if he can't accept it, then we deal with that when it happens. But I'm not walking away from this without knowing what it could be. Vivian pulled his hands away from her face, but didn't let go. I need you to understand something. I'm not good at relationships. I'm difficult and demanding, and I put work first more often than I should. I forgot Ryan's birthday twice. I'm probably going to hurt you without meaning to. And I'm a broke freelancer with a 7-year-old who comes first, always. I can't afford fancy dinners or trips or any of the things you're probably used to. My life is school pickups and client deadlines and trying to make rent every month. I'm probably going to disappoint you. So we're both disasters waiting to happen. Basically. Vivian smiled despite herself. We should definitely not do this. Absolutely not. It's a terrible idea. The worst. Neither of them moved apart. Daniel, Vivian said softly, if we do this, really do this, I need to know you're all in. I can't be someone's secret or someone's temporary escape from loneliness. I've been that before, and I won't do it again. I'm all in, terrified, but all in. Even knowing it might cost you Ryan? Even knowing that. Vivian studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever she found must have satisfied her because she finally nodded. Okay, then we try this. Really try. She squeezed his hands. But we need rules, boundaries, ways to protect everyone as much as we can. Like what? Like we don't tell Ryan until we're sure this is serious. Not just attraction or loneliness, but actual serious. I won't blow up my relationship with my son for something that might fizzle out in a month. Agreed. What else? We're honest with each other about everything. Our fears, our doubts. If one of us wants to stop. No hiding, no pretending everything's fine when it's not. I can do that. And Mia comes first. Always. Your daughter's well-being is more important than whatever this is between us. If being with me negatively affects her in any way, we stop. Daniel felt something in his chest crack open. The fact that Vivian's first concern was for his daughter, that she understood without him having to say it how important Mia was, it meant everything. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For getting it. For understanding that Mia isn't negotiable. Of course she isn't. She's your child. Nothing should come before her. Vivian's expression softened. I made that mistake with Ryan. Put work first too often. I won't encourage you to do the same. They stood there in the living room, hands still joined, the weight of decision settling around them. This was happening. They were actually doing this, taking a chance on something that made no logical sense but felt more right than anything Daniel had experienced in years. I should go, he said, even though leaving was the last thing he wanted. I know. But neither of them moved. The pull between them was too strong, the moment too fragile to break. Vivian, Daniel said, can I? He didn't finish the question. Didn't need to. Vivian closed the remaining distance between them and kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, like they were both half expecting the other to pull away. But when neither did, when the kiss deepened and Daniel's arms came around her and Vivian's hands tangled in his hair, tentative became something else entirely. It became certainty. This was real. This mattered. This was worth the risk. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vivian rested her forehead against his. That was, she started. Yeah, we're in trouble. So much trouble, but they were both smiling. Daniel kissed her again, softer this time, trying to memorize the feeling, the taste of wine on her lips, the way she fit against him like she was meant to be there, the sound she made when his hand found the small of her back. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Reality intruding on the moment. Daniel pulled it out reluctantly, saw the sitter's name on the screen. I really do have to go, he said. I know. Tuesday still? Definitely Tuesday. He kissed her one more time, quick and sweet, then forced himself to step back. If he didn't leave now, he never would. Vivian said as he reached the door. This changes everything. You know that, right? I know. No going back. I don't want to go back. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made his chest ache. Good. Neither do I. Drive safe. The drive home passed in a blur. Daniel's mind was racing, replaying the kiss, the conversation, the decisions they'd made. He'd just committed to something that would fundamentally change his relationship with Ryan, potentially destroy his closest friendship, and complicate his carefully structured life beyond recognition. And he felt more alive than he had in years. The sitter left as soon as he got home. Daniel paid her, checked on Mia, still sleeping peacefully, and collapsed on the couch. His phone buzzed almost immediately. Did you make it home? Vivian, just got here. I'm still processing what just happened. Good processing or bad processing? Good. Terrifying, but good. Daniel smiled at his phone like an idiot. Same. I can still feel you. Is that crazy? If it is, we're both crazy. I want to see you tomorrow, but Ryan? I know. Dinner plans at 7. Be careful around him. You're terrible at hiding things. How do you know I'm terrible at hiding things? Because everything you feel shows on your face. It's one of the things I like about you. Daniel thought about that, about being with someone who read him that easily, who saw through the walls he'd built. It should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt like coming home. We should probably stop texting, he sent. Get some sleep. Probably. But I don't want to. What do you want? To go back 2 hours and not let you leave? Daniel's chest tightened. Vivian, I know, too much, too fast, but I'm tired of pretending I don't feel things I actually feel. Then don't pretend. Not with me. Okay. Then I'm telling you that I haven't felt this way about anyone in a very long time, and it scares me how fast it's happening. It scares me too, but you're not running. Are you? No, which might make me the biggest fool alive, but no, I'm not running. They texted for another hour, the conversation wandering from serious to silly and back again. Vivian told him about a pitch meeting where the entrepreneur had brought a live chicken as a demonstration prop. Daniel told her about the time Mia had decided to cut her own hair the night before school photos. Easy conversation, the kind that happened when you were already comfortable with someone. Finally, close to midnight, they said goodnight. Daniel lay in bed staring at the ceiling, knowing sleep would be impossible. His mind kept replaying the kiss, the feeling of Vivian in his arms, the certainty that this was what he wanted, even knowing the cost. Tomorrow he'd have to sit across from Ryan and pretend everything was normal. He'd have to lie by omission, hide the most significant thing happening in his life. The guilt was already gnawing at him, but he'd do it, because the alternative was giving up Vivian, and that felt impossible now. Monday dragged. Daniel worked through the morning, picked up Mia from school, helped with homework, made dinner. Normal routine, normal life. While his thoughts were entirely consumed by a woman he couldn't talk about, and a secret that felt heavier with every passing hour. At 6:30, the sitter arrived. Mia was thrilled at the prospect of extra time with her favorite babysitter, barely noticed when Daniel left. He drove to the burger place Ryan had suggested, found parking, sat in his car for 5 minutes, gathering the nerve to walk inside. Ryan was already there, seated at a booth, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when Daniel approached, grinned that familiar grin that made Daniel's guilt spike fresh and sharp. There he is, looking very serious for burger night. Just tired. Daniel slid into the booth across from him. Long day. How's the new client working out? The one with the big budget? Good. Really good, actually. Might lead to more work. Daniel didn't mention that Vivian had been the one to connect him. Didn't mention thinking about her constantly or the kiss that had kept him awake half the night. That's awesome, man. You deserve it. You're talented as hell, you just needed the right opportunities. The server came, took their orders. Ryan talked about work, about the conference in Atlanta, about a girl he'd met who seemed promising until she mentioned she was moving to Seattle in 2 months. Normal conversation between friends who told each other everything. Except Daniel wasn't telling everything. He was actively hiding the most important thing. You seem distracted, Ryan said after the food arrived. Just a lot on my mind. The complicated person you mentioned? The one you're talking to? Daniel's stomach dropped. What? Last week, at the bar, you said you were talking to someone, but it was complicated. How's that going? It's going. Still complicated? More complicated than before, actually. Ryan took a bite of his burger, studying Daniel with the kind of focus that meant he was reading between the lines. Is this person married? Is that why it's complicated? No, nothing like that. Then what? They live far away? Have kids that don't get along with Mia? What's the complication? Daniel scrambled for something true that wasn't the actual truth. It's just the timing and the circumstances. We're from really different worlds. Different how? Financially, professionally, just different. Since when do you care about that stuff? You've never been the kind of guy who gets intimidated by success. I'm not intimidated. I'm just realistic. Some gaps are too big to bridge. Ryan set down his burger. Okay, you're being weird. Like, weirder than normal weird. What's actually going on? Nothing's going on. I'm just trying to figure things out. With this mystery person who you won't tell me about. It's new. I don't want to jinx it by talking about it too much. Or you're embarrassed. I'm not embarrassed. Then why won't you tell me who it is? Because it's your mother. Because I'm betraying your trust with every second I don't tell you. Because I'm falling for someone I have no business falling for, and I don't know how to make it right. I just need time to figure out if it's real before I bring other people into it, Daniel said carefully. Ryan seemed to accept that. Fair enough. But when you're ready to talk, I'm here. You know that, right? I know. You're my best friend, man. Whatever's going on, you can tell me. The guilt was crushing. Daniel forced a smile. I appreciate that, really. The conversation moved on to safer topics. Basketball. Mia's upcoming school play. Ryan's mother's latest investment that had made news. That last one made Daniel's chest tighten, but he navigated it carefully, asking neutral questions, pretending he didn't know more about Vivian Hart's daily life than her own son did. By the time dinner ended, Daniel felt wrung out. He said goodbye to Ryan in the parking lot, drove home, paid the sitter, and checked on Mia. She was asleep, her new library book open on her chest, marker stains on her fingers from an art project. Daniel sat on the edge of her bed and watched her breathe. This was his priority, this small person who trusted him completely. Whatever happened with Vivian, whatever fallout came from Ryan finding out, Mia came first. He pulled out his phone. Just got home from dinner with Ryan, he texted Vivian. How was it? Awful. He asked about the person I'm seeing. I lied through my teeth. I'm sorry. Don't be. This is my choice. I'm just not good at lying to him. Do you want to stop? Before this gets more complicated? Daniel looked at his sleeping daughter, thought about his best friend, considered all the rational reasons to end this now before anyone got hurt worse. No, he sent. I don't want to stop. Do you? No. Which probably makes me selfish. It makes you human. When can I see you again? Tomorrow afternoon? Same time as usual? I'll be here. Good. I've been thinking about you all day. Same. Couldn't focus on work, got nothing done. The great Vivian Hart, felled by distraction. Shocking. I'm allowed to be distracted. By what specifically? You. The kiss. The way you looked at me when you left. Everything. Daniel felt heat spread through his chest. They were texting like teenagers, but he didn't care. This felt real and immediate and important. I haven't been able to stop thinking about kissing you, he sent. Good. Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about doing it again. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, Vivian agreed. But Daniel? Yeah? We need to start thinking about when we tell Ryan. This can't stay secret forever. I know. Not yet. But soon, before he finds out another way. Agreed. Let's just get through the next few weeks. Make sure this is what we both think it is. And if it is, then we tell him. Together. And deal with whatever happens. Okay? I can live with that. They said goodnight. Daniel got ready for bed, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind was racing with possibilities and consequences, with the feeling of Vivian's lips against his and the look on Ryan's face when he'd asked about the mystery person. This was unsustainable. They both knew it, but neither of them was ready to stop. Tuesday afternoon came wrapped in anticipation. Daniel dropped Mia at school, worked through the morning, and at 2 o'clock found himself once again driving to Vivian's house. This time he didn't hesitate, didn't knock, just used the code and walked in like he belonged there. Vivian was in the kitchen, and the moment she saw him, her face transformed. She crossed the room in 3 strides and kissed him like she'd been waiting hours for permission. And maybe she had been. Maybe they both had been. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vivian pressed her forehead against his. Hi, she said. Hi yourself. I missed you. It's been one day. I know, I'm being ridiculous. I missed you too. They moved to the couch, settled into the same spots as before, except this time Vivian curled into his side. It felt natural, right, like they'd been doing this for years instead of just starting. Tell me about Mia's day, Vivian said. So Daniel did. Told her about the school play auditions, about Mia's excitement over getting a small speaking part, about the costume they'd need to figure out. Vivian listened with genuine interest, asked questions, remembered details from previous conversations. It struck Daniel how easy this was, how comfortable, how Vivian never made him feel like talking about his daughter was boring or inconvenient. She engaged with his life, all the messy, mundane parts, like it mattered to her because it mattered to him. I want to meet her, Vivian said suddenly. Daniel's stomach flipped. Mia? Eventually, not yet. Obviously, but if this is going where I think it's going, I want to know your daughter. That's a big step. I know. Too much? No. Just unexpected. Most people I've dated didn't want anything to do with the fact that I had a kid. I'm not most people, and Mia is part of you. I can't separate those things. Daniel kissed her temple. You're kind of amazing. You know that? I'm really not. I'm difficult and complicated and probably making your life much harder than it needs to be. Yeah, but you're still amazing. They spent the afternoon talking, kissing, existing in the strange bubble they'd created. Hours passed without Daniel noticing. When his phone alarm went off, Mia's school pickup, he felt genuine disappointment. I don't want you to go. Vivian said. I don't want to go either. But Mia needs you. She does. Vivian walked him to the door, kissed him goodbye, held on just a moment longer than necessary. Same time Thursday? She asked. I'll be here. Good, because I'm getting used to this. Me too. That's what scares me. Being scared isn't always bad. Sometimes it means you found something worth protecting. Daniel kissed her one more time, then forced himself to leave. The drive to Mia's school, the pickup routine, dinner, and homework, all of it felt surreal. Like he was living two lives simultaneously, and neither one felt entirely real anymore. That night after Mia was asleep, his phone rang. Ryan. Hey, quick question. Are you free Saturday afternoon? Probably. Why? Mom's throwing this charity event at the house. Boring networking thing, but she asked if I knew anyone who did web design. Apparently one of the nonprofits needs help. I immediately thought of you. Daniel's blood went cold. At your mom's house? Yeah, fancy people, fancy food, probably terrible conversation. But it's a paid gig and good exposure. You interested? This was a disaster. Being at Vivian's house in front of Ryan and dozens of other people, pretending they were strangers. The stress of it alone might kill him, but saying no would raise questions he couldn't answer. Yeah, Daniel heard himself say. I'm interested. Perfect. I'll text you the details. Fair warning, you'll have to wear actual nice clothes. No jeans. I own nice clothes. Since when? Since I'm a professional adult. Ryan laughed. Right. Forgot about that part. Anyway, Saturday at 2. Don't be late or my mom will judge you. The call ended. Daniel stared at his phone, his mind racing. He needed to tell Vivian, needed to figure out how they were going to handle this. He texted her immediately. Ryan just invited me to your charity event Saturday. What? Apparently you need someone who does web design. He suggested me. Oh no. Yeah. What did you say? I said yes. Saying no would have been suspicious. There was a long pause. Then, this is going to be complicated. Very. We'll have to pretend we barely know each other, in front of your son and a bunch of strangers, while wanting to touch you the entire time. This is a terrible idea, the worst. But we don't have a choice now. No, we don't. Saturday at 2. I'll see you there. And Daniel? Yeah? Try not to look at me the way you usually do. Ryan will notice. I'll do my best. Your best better be good, because this could go very wrong very fast. Daniel set down his phone and closed his eyes. Saturday was going to be a nightmare. But it was also an opportunity. A chance to see Vivian in her element, to understand more fully the world she operated in. And maybe, just maybe, a chance to prove to both of them that this thing between them was strong enough to survive the scrutiny. He just had to make it through without giving everything away. How hard could that be? Saturday arrived with all the subtlety of a freight train. Daniel woke up with his stomach in knots, spent 20 minutes staring into his closet trying to remember what constituted nice clothes, and eventually settled on dark slacks and a button-down shirt that Mia declared made him look fancy but not weird. High praise from a 7-year-old. He dropped Mia at her friend's house for a play date, drove home, changed shirts twice more, and finally forced himself into the car before he could talk himself out of attending entirely. The entire drive to Vivian's house felt like heading toward his own execution, pretending to be strangers, in front of Ryan. While a house full of wealthy strangers networked and judged and evaluated everyone around them, this was going to be a disaster. The circular driveway was already packed with expensive cars when Daniel arrived. Catering vans lined the side street. People in black uniforms moved efficiently through the open front door carrying trays and equipment. The house that had felt intimate and personal during his private visits now looked like exactly what it was, a billionaire showcase designed to impress. Daniel parked his aging Honda between a Mercedes and a Tesla, feeling acutely aware of the check engine light that had come back on yesterday. He sat for a moment, gathering his nerve, reminding himself he belonged here professionally, even if personally he was drowning in deception. His phone buzzed. Vivian, you're here. I can see your car from the window, trying to remember how to breathe. Same. This is going to be harder than I thought. We can do this. Can we? We have to. Ryan's already inside. Daniel took a deep breath, pocketed his phone, and walked toward the house like a man heading into battle. The interior had been transformed. The kitchen where they'd shared coffee and conversation was now a staging area for catering staff. The living room where they'd kissed was full of strangers holding wine glasses and making polite conversation. Everything felt foreign, like someone had taken the space he was starting to know and replaced it with an expensive facsimile. "Daniel, you made it!" Ryan appeared from the crowd, grinning, looking completely comfortable in this world that Daniel would never quite fit into. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than Daniel's monthly rent, hair perfectly styled, the ease of someone who'd grown up with money and never had to think about it. "Wouldn't miss it," Daniel lied. "Come on, I'll introduce you to my mom. She's holding court in the study." Daniel's stomach dropped. He'd been hoping for at least a few minutes to adjust before having to pretend he didn't know Vivian intimately. No such luck. Ryan led him through the crowd, past networking groups and artistic types clutching manifestos, toward the study where Daniel had first seen Vivian frustrated with paperwork and looking beautifully human. Now she stood in the center of the room, commanding attention without trying, wearing a black dress that was simple and devastating in equal measure. She looked up as they approached. Their eyes met. Daniel saw everything he was feeling reflected back at him: anxiety, desire, the terrible strain of pretending. Then Vivian's expression smoothed into polite professional interest, and Daniel understood he was watching a masterclass in control. "Mom, this is Daniel Harper, the web designer I told you about." Vivian extended her hand. "Mr. Harper, Ryan speaks very highly of your work." Daniel shook her hand, felt the brief squeeze of her fingers, the unspoken message. "We can do this. We have to do this." "Miss Hart, thank you for having me." "Please call me Vivian. Ryan tells me you specialize in nonprofit web design." "Among other things, I work with whoever needs help, really." Refreshingly honest. Vivian turned to Ryan. "Could you give us a moment? I'd like to discuss the scope of what we need." Ryan nodded, already distracted by someone calling his name across the room. "Sure, Daniel, find me later. We'll grab food." He disappeared into the crowd. Daniel and Vivian stood in the study, surrounded by people, but somehow isolated in their own bubble of tension. "You look terrified," Vivian said quietly. "I am terrified." "Me too." She glanced around, ensuring no one was listening too closely. "There's a nonprofit representative by the window. Green dress, carrying a folder. Her organization needs a complete website overhaul. Go talk to her. Make it look professional." "And then what?" "Then you do your job. I do mine. We get through this without giving anything away." Vivian's voice dropped even lower. "And tonight, after everyone leaves, we figure out how long we can keep doing this before it destroys us." She moved away before Daniel could respond, drawn into conversation with a group of donors who looked like they wrote checks with multiple zeros. Daniel watched her shift seamlessly into CEO mode, charming, sharp, completely in control. This was her world. He was just visiting. The nonprofit representative turned out to be a woman named Catherine, who ran an after-school program for underprivileged kids. She was passionate, articulate, and had absolutely no budget for web design. Daniel found himself agreeing to do the work pro bono before he could think better of it, and Catherine looked like she might cry with gratitude. "I can't pay you what you're worth," she said. "You're helping kids who need it. That's worth more than money. You're a good person, Daniel Harper." He wasn't sure about that anymore. Good people didn't lie to their best friends. Good people didn't get involved with their friend's mother. Good people made choices that didn't require this much deception. But he smiled and exchanged contact information with Catherine, and when he looked up, he caught Vivian watching him from across the room. The expression on her face was complicated: pride, affection, something deeper he couldn't quite name. The afternoon crawled forward. Daniel made small talk with strangers, ate fancy food he couldn't identify, and tried not to stare at Vivian every time she laughed or moved or simply existed in the same space. Ryan appeared periodically, introducing Daniel to potential clients, playing the role of supportive friend while completely oblivious to the undercurrent swirling around him. Around 4 o'clock, Ryan pulled Daniel aside. "So what do you think of my mom?" Daniel nearly choked on his wine. "What?" "My mom. You've talked to her a few times now. What's your read?" "She's impressive, smart, good at what she does." "But?" Ryan was watching him with that too perceptive expression that meant he was reading between lines. No, but she's exactly what you said she was. You're being weird again. I'm not being weird. You're definitely being weird. You get this look on your face when you're hiding something. You've had it for weeks. Daniel's heart was pounding. I'm not hiding anything. The mystery person you're seeing, the one you won't talk about, it's not my mom, is it? The question landed like a bomb. Daniel stared at Ryan, his brain scrambling for a response that wasn't either a lie or a confession. That's insane, he managed. Is it? You've been acting strange since you started coming to her house. You get this look when someone mentions her. And just now, when I asked what you thought, you looked guilty as hell. Ryan, I'm not an idiot, Daniel. I see things. And I've been seeing this for a while. I just didn't want to believe it. Daniel felt the world tilting. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. They were supposed to have more time. They were supposed to figure out how to tell Ryan gently, carefully, together. We need to talk, Daniel said quietly. But not here. Oh, we're definitely talking. Now! Ryan's voice was hard in a way Daniel had never heard before. Are you sleeping with my mother? No, it's not. We haven't, but you want to. Daniel couldn't lie anymore, couldn't keep pretending. Yes. Ryan's expression cycled through shock, anger, betrayal. How long? A few weeks, since the first time I came here to drop off your backpack. A few weeks? You've been lying to me for weeks. I wasn't trying to hurt you. Well, you did. My best friend and my mother, that's... Ryan laughed without humor. That's actually impressive. I didn't think you had it in you to betray me like this. Ryan, please. Does she know you're broke? That you can barely make rent? That you're not even close to her world? The words were designed to hurt, and they landed perfectly. Daniel felt them like physical blows. She knows everything about me, including that I'm not good enough for her by any conventional standard. She doesn't care. Of course she cares. My mother cares about appearances and status and strategic advantage. You're a distraction, a novelty. She'll get bored and move on, and you'll be left with nothing, no best friend, no connection to her, just the wreckage of what you destroyed. You don't know what we have. I know my mother, and I know you're making the biggest mistake of your life. Vivian appeared then, materializing at Daniel's shoulder like she'd sensed the confrontation. Ryan, what's going on? Ask your boyfriend. Oh, wait, sorry. Is that what he is? Or is this just a casual thing? A little excitement to break up the monotony of being a billionaire? Ryan, Vivian's voice had steel in it. No, you don't get to do this, either of you. Dad left and you buried yourself in work, and I dealt with it. I accepted it. But this? Ryan gestured between them. This is unforgivable. Your father leaving has nothing to do with Daniel, doesn't it? You've been alone for years. Now suddenly you're interested in my best friend? That's not suspicious at all. I care about him, Vivian said quietly. You care about winning, about being in control, about getting what you want regardless of who it hurts. Ryan's voice cracked slightly. I'm your son. Doesn't that matter? Of course it matters. You matter more than anything. Then end this. Tell him it was a mistake. Let him go before this gets worse. Vivian looked at Daniel and he saw everything in her expression. The fear, the conflict, the impossible choice between her son and whatever this thing was that had grown between them. Daniel made the decision for her. I should go, he said. Daniel, wait. Vivian reached for him. No, Ryan's right. This is a mess. I never should have let it get this far. You don't mean that. I do. I have a daughter, a life. I can't blow everything up for something that was probably doomed from the start. The words tasted like ash, but Daniel forced them out. Ryan was his best friend. Vivian was Ryan's mother. There was no version of this that ended well. He walked away before either of them could stop him, pushed through the crowd of networking strangers, made it to his car before the reality of what he'd just done hit him fully. He'd ended it, walked away from the first real connection he'd felt in years, did it to preserve a friendship that might already be destroyed anyway. Daniel sat in his car, hands shaking, trying to remember how to breathe. His phone buzzed. Vivian, don't do this, please. It's already done. We can fix this. Talk to Ryan. Make him understand. There's nothing to understand. You're his mother. I'm his best friend. We crossed a line we shouldn't have crossed. So that's it? You're just giving up? Daniel stared at the message. Was he giving up, or was he finally making the smart choice he should have made weeks ago? I have to think about Mia, about what's best for her, and getting involved in this kind of drama, isn't it? You're using your daughter as an excuse. The accusation stung because it was partially true. Mia was his priority, always. But she was also his justification for avoiding risk, for choosing safety over possibility. Maybe I am, he sent back. But that's my choice to make. And what about what I want? You'll survive, you always do. You're Vivian Hart. You don't need me. That's not true. Yes, it is. You built an empire alone. You'll be fine alone again. He put his phone on silent and drove home, feeling like he'd left something essential behind. The rest of the day passed in a blur of mechanical motions. Pick up Mia, make dinner, help with homework, read bedtime stories, all the normal things while feeling completely hollow inside. That night, after Mia was asleep, Daniel finally looked at his phone. 17 missed calls from Vivian, 12 texts. He read them all, each one a knife to the chest. This is cowardice. You're running because it got hard. I thought you were braver than this. I'm not giving up on us, even if you are. The last message was from an hour ago. I love you, and I think you love me too. That has to count for something. Daniel set down his phone and put his head in his hands. She'd said it, actually said it. The thing they'd both been dancing around for weeks, and he'd walked away anyway. His phone rang. Ryan. Daniel considered not answering, but that felt like more cowardice. Hey, I talked to my mom. Ryan's voice was tired. She's a mess. Says you ended things. I did. Why? Because it was the right thing to do. For everyone. Was it? Or were you just scared? Daniel didn't have an answer for that. Look, Ryan continued, I'm pissed. I'm hurt. I feel betrayed. But I also know my mother, and I've never seen her like this about anyone. She's in love with you, you idiot. I know. And you're in love with her. Doesn't matter. How does it not matter? Because you're my best friend, and choosing her means losing you. I can't do that. Ryan was quiet for a long moment. What if you didn't have to choose? What? I'm not saying it'll be easy. I'm not saying I'm okay with it, but maybe what you two have is worth fighting for, even if it's weird and complicated and makes me want to throw up a little bit. Daniel felt something crack in his chest. You'd be okay with this? I didn't say okay. I said maybe willing to try. On one condition. What condition? You don't give up on her. My mom has been alone for so long because everyone eventually gives up on her. They decide she's too difficult or too busy or too much. If you're going to do this, you have to be all in. No running when it gets hard. Ryan, I mean it. She deserves someone who stays. Can you be that person? Daniel thought about Vivian, about the way she looked at him, about the conversations that went deeper than anything he'd experienced, about the feeling that with her he was more himself than he'd been in years. Yes, he said, I can be that person. Then go get her. And Daniel? Yeah? If you hurt her, I will absolutely destroy you. Fair enough. The call ended. Daniel sat for maybe 30 seconds before grabbing his keys and heading back out the door. The sitter was surprised to be called at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, but she came anyway, and Daniel was on the road 10 minutes later. The drive to Vivian's house felt endless and instantaneous. The catering vans were gone. The expensive cars had departed. The house was dark, except for a single light in the study. Daniel used the door code, walked through the quiet house to the study where Vivian sat on the floor surrounded by papers, her fancy dress replaced by sweatpants and an old t-shirt. She looked up when he entered, and he saw she'd been crying. You came back, she said. I'm an idiot. Yes, you are. But she was smiling slightly. Daniel sat down next to her on the floor. I got scared. The thing with Ryan, the reality of what we're doing, it all hit me at once and I panicked. I know, but I don't want to be the kind of person who runs when things get hard. I don't want to be the kind of person who gives up on something real because it's complicated. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you, and I'm terrified, and I have no idea how we make this work. But I want to try. Vivian's eyes filled with tears again. You really hurt me. Walking away like that. I know. I'm sorry. Don't do it again. I won't, I promise. She kissed him then, hard and desperate, like she was trying to convince herself he was really there. Daniel pulled her close, felt her shake slightly, realized she'd been just as scared as he was. Ryan called me, he said when they broke apart. I know, I asked him to. You asked him to? I told him that I loved you and I wasn't giving up, and that he needed to either get on board or stay out of it. That I'd choose him if I had to, but I didn't want to have to choose. What did he say? That he needed time to process, that it was weird and uncomfortable, and he might never be fully okay with it, but that he'd try. Vivian touched Daniel's face. For me, and for you, because apparently you're both important to him. He gave me one condition, that I don't give up on you. Can you do that? Not give up when I'm difficult and demanding and impossible? Can you do the same when I'm broke and anxious and overthinking everything? I think we can figure it out together. They sat on the study floor, holding each other, processing everything that had happened. It wasn't perfect. Ryan would need time. There would be awkward family dinners and complicated conversations. People would judge. The press might find out eventually, and that would bring its own complications. But sitting there with Vivian, feeling her breathing even out, knowing they'd both chosen this despite the cost, Daniel felt something that had been missing for years. Hope. I need to tell you about Mia, he said. Okay. She comes first, always, no matter what. If being with me means being part of her life, you need to understand that's non-negotiable. I know, and I want that. To know your daughter. To be part of your actual life, not just the secret parts. She's going to ask a million questions. She's going to want to know everything about you. She's exhausting and wonderful, and she'll probably love you immediately because she loves everyone. Vivian smiled. She sounds perfect. She is. And she deserves honesty. So when we tell her about us, we do it together. No hiding. Agreed. They talked for hours, working through logistics and fears, and the thousand small details that came with building something real. By the time Daniel left, the sun was starting to rise, and they'd made plans for Vivian to meet Mia the following week. The next few weeks were awkward and beautiful in equal measure. Ryan was stiff at first, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but he showed up to dinners and tried to be supportive even when it was obviously killing him. Mia took to Vivian immediately, asking her approximately 8 million questions about being a CEO, and did she have a private jet, and could they please get a puppy? Vivian proved to be better with kids than she'd claimed, patient with Mia's endless energy, genuinely interested in her stories about school and friends, and the injustice of bedtimes. Watching them together, Daniel felt pieces of his life that had been separate finally connecting. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments about time and priorities. There were moments when the wealth gap felt unbridgeable. There were family dinners where Ryan looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. But there were also mornings when Daniel woke up next to Vivian and felt grateful for the choice they'd made. There were afternoons when the three of them, Daniel, Vivian, and Mia, would do something ordinary like grocery shopping or a movie, and it felt more valuable than anything money could buy. 6 months in, Ryan pulled Daniel aside after a particularly uncomfortable Sunday brunch. I need to tell you something, Ryan said. Okay, I'm getting used to this. You and my mom. It's still weird, but I can see she's happy. Really happy. And you're good for her. Yeah? Yeah, she smiles more, stresses less, actually takes days off occasionally. That's all because of you. Ryan paused. So thank you for not giving up when I made it hard. You're my best friend. It was worth fighting for. Just promise me one thing. What's that? If you two get married, I don't have to be in the wedding party. That's where I draw the line. Daniel laughed despite himself. Deal. Looking back, Daniel would realize that the scariest thing about love isn't the risk of getting hurt. It's the risk of missing out because you were too afraid to try. For years after Mia's mother left, he'd been playing it safe, protecting himself from vulnerability, choosing loneliness over the possibility of pain. Vivian had cracked that open, forced him to acknowledge that a life without risk was a life half-lived. That connection required courage, and courage meant sometimes making choices that didn't make logical sense. She'd been scared too, scared of losing her son, scared of being too difficult or too much, scared that no one would stay once they really knew her. But they'd both chosen to try anyway, and in that choice they'd found something neither of them had expected. Not just romance, but partnership. Not just attraction, but genuine friendship. Not just someone to be with, but someone who made them better versions of themselves. Mia summed it up best one night at dinner, when Vivian had stayed late and was helping clean up. "Dad, I like Vivian. Can she stay forever?" Daniel looked at Vivian across the kitchen, saw her smile, felt his heart do that thing it always did now when he looked at her. "I think she might," he said. "Good," Mia declared, "because she's my friend now too, and friends stay." Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds came the simplest truth. Friends stay, partners stay. People who love you stay. Even when it's hard, even when it's complicated, even when the whole world thinks you're making a mistake. Daniel had been ready to run. Vivian had been ready to let him go rather than force something that couldn't work, but they'd both chosen to stay instead. And in that staying, in that commitment to showing up even when it was terrifying, they'd built something that felt permanent in a world of temporary things. It wasn't the life Daniel had planned. It wasn't the safe, controlled existence he'd thought he wanted. It was messier, more complicated, infinitely richer than anything he could have designed. And as he watched Vivian teach Mia how to make bread from scratch, while Ryan sent passive-aggressive texts about how domestic his mother had become, Daniel understood something fundamental. The best things in life don't make sense on paper. They don't fit into neat categories or follow logical progression. They happen when you're brave enough to take a chance on something that scares you, when you choose connection over comfort, when you let someone in even knowing they might hurt you. Because the alternative, the safe, lonely alternative, isn't really living at all. It's just existing. And Daniel was done with just existing. He was ready to live.